Thank you very much, Stewart. Okay, now we've got about 20 minutes left to just have a bit of a panel discussion, as well as questions from the audience and from any tweets as well. So if you do have questions, could you make your way to the microphones? They are switched on at the moment, so it would be great to hear. I actually will jump in and ask the first question, if that's all right. Martin, I was actually going to ask you, in terms of your carbon offsetting, do you think it's okay that it's carbon offsetting in trees rather than the marine environment, or what's your thoughts on that? And the panel, of course.
Thank you, Laura. That's actually a great question. The reason we went for trees was because there was no gold standard blue carbon project in the world. And we've actually been working with CSIRO and we're talking with Stewart and others to see if we can actually create a blue carbon offsetting scheme. But the main aim from our perspective was make sure it was biodiverse, so not just planting blue gums, that it had social positive impact and that it had positive community benefits as well.
Do we have a question? A question from John. If you could say who you are for everybody, I'm sure everybody knows you, John.
Hi, John Harrison, WA Fishing Industry Council. A supplementary question to that, Martin, if I may. Did you consider the regeneration of wetlands as an offset to also assist with rejuvenating some of the fish species that we rely upon to actually sustain our commercial fishing operations? And do you think that's an option for future?
Absolutely, totally, 100% agree. Yes, we looked at it. There are, unfortunately, as I said, no one is currently measuring how much carbon regenerating wetlands actually sequesters, but it's coming. There are also like mangrove replanting programs, and for us, we have a base in Mauritius where we operate in the Southern Ocean. There's actually already an existing mangrove replanting program, and it's just a matter of measuring the positive impact of that so that that can then be demonstrated to government that we've done something really good. Just to add, though, to the confusion side of things, the problem is the government already takes all of that themselves and puts it in the pocket for the Paris Agreement. So under the Paris Agreement, even the guys that are doing this biodiversity planting in West Australia, they have to actually get offset units themselves because the government's already counting that, even though it would never have happened except for this project. So yeah, it's an interesting little area at the moment. But good question. Thank you, John.
Thank you for that. A question from Twitter Sphere. Is there a mechanism for small-scale guys to become carbon neutral, or is it just for the big boys who can commit the dollars and time? Sorry, Martin, another question for you.
Perfect question. Okay, so to demonstrate how much it costs to go carbon neutral, I had a lunch with 12 people, 12 friends, 100% carbon neutral, all right, everything. I took into account them driving there, driving home, the alcohol we drank, which was probably pretty high on the carbon neutral, the food, the preparation and everything else, and I offset it, and it cost $21.50. So you can be as small as you like, it's not a problem. Carbon offsetting is not the big boogeyman. And the airlines, one of the issues the airlines had was when they actually put the true cost of carbon offsetting on the, you know, when you buy your ticket and you da-da-da, it was so low, people didn't believe it. They thought they were just paying an extra 50 cents or 60 cents. So you can do it no matter what size.
Sorry, can I just ask?
Of course.
Do you have a percentage revenue or something like that that would be based for how much you're spending on carbon offsetting? I know you said $21, but you know, if a company's at $1 million, are you spending 1% on carbon offsetting?
No, it doesn't quite. No. I'm just trying to quickly do some calculation. 3%. There we go. Put 3%. Thank God, of the turnover of the company. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Do you have a question?
Good, I'm Aaron from the National Aquaculture Council. I've got a question for you, Jonathan. When you were going through your speech, you were talking about your business partner, Matthew, and the waste component and the waste management component a little bit in your talk. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about that and about sort of what the flies eat, for instance.
Thank you, Aaron. So Matt, because of his recycling business, has a huge amount of contacts within Tanzania for waste removal already. Currently, what we're using is actually entirely vegetable waste from hotels and restaurants around the cities. But what we'll be very quickly moving into is byproduct waste. So that would be large juice factories, the brewers, any kind of slaughterhouse waste potentially down the road. We're a little bit iffy on the slaughterhouse waste at the moment because we need to make sure that everything's halal in a predominantly Muslim nation. But that's primarily it. They do eat practically anything. They are a little bit picky. We found that they don't like brewers' grain that much, but in general they eat everything.
Thank you for that. We actually also have another question for Jonathan. What is the main constraint to expansion?
Okay. The main constraint to expansion is twofold. So once you get past a certain size, which is probably about 1 ton of actually lava a day, you need to get to a stage of high level of automation. And so the major cost to actually, the big thing to expanding is actually just cost. You go from just a few people moving around a few plastic trays with lava in it to actually having large multi-level systems that has to have a large level of automation. The other limitation would be how much organic waste is available. But in our case, we've got a huge amount of organic waste. Fortunately, we're in the tropics, so the temperature's constantly around, which isn't an issue.
Thank you. There was a question for Dennis in terms of upgrades in efficiency to equipment and upgrades to our people skills and knowledge. With your Nuffield experience, how do we compare in Australia to overseas?
Depends what we're talking about. In the Nuffield thing, in farming, I think we're fairly comparable to overseas. Fishing, some places we're up on, a fair majority we're down on. And yeah, I think that might have it.
Do we have any more questions from the floor? Yes, we do. If you just state your name.
My question is to Dr. Arul. Actually, do you replace this protein source when you prepare the fish feed with insect protein level, or you totally use the insect protein to prepare the feed?
Thank you for your question. So at the moment, we're about to start the field trials in the ponds and the recirc systems that I showed you. We'll try a variety of inclusion rates, but everything that we've looked at so far says that we're probably going to cap at a 20% inclusion rate. So we still will be using fish meal and soya bean and be providing the lacking amino acids, which is primarily methionine, additionally with the other raw ingredients of the diet. So the answer to the question is no, not a complete replacement.
Thank you for that. There's a question here in the front.
Hi, I'm Stephanie from Sydney Fish Market, and I have another question for Jonathan. I was wondering, have you tested the system with other types of insects or flies, or is it that specific fly that it can be done with? I just imagine there's other countries who would probably like to replicate it and would have biosecurity issues with trying to bring in a new species to do it.
Good question. Jonathan?
Yeah, I didn't try to bring in any fly myself here, but they are available. They are indigenous here as well, black soldier fly, and it's a pretty ubiquitous species globally, which is why a lot of people have done work with them. To answer the first part of your question, we have not done other work with other flies, but we do know other much larger insect companies that have done work with them and are experimenting with them. To date, most progress has been made with Hermetia lucens. And off the top of my head, I can't say how well the other flies are fared.
Thank you for that. Oh, we have a question here.
Yeah, Glenn Hill from Lakes and Coorong Fishery. So our fishery has worked on a variety of things, from bird counts, supplying information, through to SA Water about better use of water, a variety of things like that. So what I'm talking about here isn't about just carbon. So this is about the eco footprint. Whereabouts do you guys stand with the eco footprint?
That's a brilliant question, actually. The eco footprint, if you like, we first off looked at the sustainable seafood side of things. So we're looking at ecosystem-based management and hence the MSC certification. The second part was the biodiversity aspect, and the difficulty was, as John pointed out before, that we couldn't find a blue carbon thing, but at least by getting involved in biodiverse plantings where, you know, it's 50 different species, they're native vegetation, it's rejuvenation and revegetation. And then, yeah, lastly, I suppose it's really a matter of we're not quite sure what more we can do at this point in time, but I'm certain something will happen in future. You know, the sort of amazing programs that Stewart's talking about provide all sorts of opportunities, I suspect. Equally, taking our boats and tapping into Dennis's electric boat thing is just fantastic, you know. So those opportunities will come to improve for sure.
All right. Do we have any further questions from the floor here? Are we all done?
I can do one more.
Yes, a comment from Brian, just a minute. Yeah.
And like Martin, I was at the graduation event for that leadership program, and it blew my mind as well. You had to leave at about that time, Martin, but afterwards, Stephanie and I were having a chat with the representative from Qantas that was there, and he's since made contact with us at Sydney Fish Market, and he is really keen for Qantas to work with the seafood industry to see if we can take the blue carbon model anywhere. Steph and I are meeting with him next week, so where we can take it. So when you get the horsepower of a company like Qantas indicating that they're wanting to work and see if we can find a way of creating a standard for blue carbon sequestration, I think we should jump at it. And I'd love to have Austral's input into that process, because you've done the journey, we haven't.
Well, that sounds very promising. If that is all of the questions, I would like you to all thank the panel for their contributions today. Much appreciated.